Yate, my relatives. Hello, it's Mark Charles. Today is Thursday, January 18th, and I'm sitting here still with my second cup of coffee. And I wanted to have a conversation today about microplastics. But before we begin, let me do like I always do, which is acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what are now Piscataway land, or what used to be Piscataway lands. Now it's called Washington, D.C. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands, and I just want to state how humbling it is to be living on these lands today. So, about a week ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know what I was doing, if I was listening to some headline news or I was just scrolling through some news websites. But I saw a headline that talked about some research regarding a hurricane and the number of microplastics that the hurricane dropped when it made landfall. And I kind of filed it into my mind. I didn't have a lot of time to go back and research it, but it kind of caught my attention, and I just filed it in my mind, and I thought I'll come back to that later. So about a week ago, I decided to do a little bit of research, and I was looking at the use of microplastics, and I wanted to just share with you some of the things I've been learning about microplastics and the effects that they're having on our world, on our health, on our environment, and as well as the huge unknown we have regarding microplastics. So the first thing I did is I wanted to find out, well, what's the headline I was reading? And I don't know exactly which one it was, but I found this article. It's in Wired. And this can be a hard article to read on Wired because they only let you read 1 or 2 articles a month unless you have a subscription. And so the article was actually republished um, through another magazine called Hakai magazine. And the Wired magazine article was titled, "Oh Good, Hurricanes Are Now Made of Microplastics." And the republished article was titled, "Modern Hurricanes Have a Surprise Ingredient." And I just want to read a few lines from this article. It says, as Larry, this was Hurricane Larry back in 2021, passed over Newfoundland, the instrument gobbled up what fell from the sky. That included rain, of course, but also gobs of microplastics, defined as smaller bits of bits smaller than 5 millimeters of plastic. At its peak, Larry was depositing over 100,000 microplastics per square meter of land per day. Um, and it goes on in the article to say microplastic pollution comes from so many sources: our clothing, car tires, paint chips, broken down bottles, and bags. That's all mixed into a kind of multi-polymer soup out there. It's true both in the oceans and in the sky. And microplastics haven't just gone airborne, but have become a fundamental component of Earth's atmosphere. And so, what this article did for me is it showed me, because we've all heard some of the stats about the way that we're ingesting microplastics in our food, we're drinking it in our water, but this was some of the most concrete publication I had seen about the fact that we're actually inhaling it through the air that we breathe. And so I started just doing some more searching and trying to understand the effect that microplastic is having. Already, again, we've heard the research that we're probably ingesting about a credit card's worth of plastic even per week because of microplastics. And I was looking for where that story came from. First of all, let's just talk briefly about what microplastics are. It said in the article, it gave a definition of it there, but here's something published by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. What are microplastics? And microplastics are small plastic pieces less than 5 millimeters long that can be harmful to our oceans and to aquatic life. And so most of the microplastics that are 5 millimeters or even can be measured in millimeters, those are things you can see with your eye, and they're not necessarily the microplastics that we're inhaling. The microplastics that we're inhaling are actually much smaller, and they're building up a little more slowly, but we are inhaling them into our lungs and other parts of our body, and they're actually going down to what they call nanoplastics. And so nanoplastics are even smaller than microplastics. And I want to just give you a little bit of the difference of the definition between the two. So a microplastic is a plastic that is less than 5 millimeters long. I mean, that was just a definition we got from NOAA. A nanoplastic is a plastic that is 1/1 billionth of a meter. And so it's generally refers to something with a dimension of 1 to 100 nanometers. Or a nanometer is 1/1 billionth of a meter. And so these are getting down into the microscopic range. These are the things that can much more become airborne. And these are the things that are increasing as microplastics are in the environment longer. They continue to break down. Eventually they get smaller and smaller, and then they become nanoplastics, which is what makes them airborne. And so the research I was looking for is, what effect is nanoplastics having? And first, I'm going to share a lot of articles with you in here because I just want to kind of put all of these together for you. So here's an article by CNN that talks about the nanoplastics that we are ingesting. And they ran this article. This was back in 2022. And I'm going to share that article with you right here. And that talks about, that's the article that says we're ingesting about a credit card's worth of nanoplastics every week. And the research for that actually comes from a study, and I had to do a little bit of searching to find the study that research came from, but it came from, and let me find it here, I want to share it with you. Where are we? Newsweek, where is that article on nanoplastics? That's the Nature article. I think I have it right here. So the article where the nanoplastics is coming from is titled "Estimation of the Mass of Microplastics Ingested, a Pivotal First Step Towards Human Health Risk Assessment." I'm going to share this article in the chat as well. And this was a study published by the University of Newcastle in Australia. And I'm going to put that research, that article right here in the chat. It's at the www.ScienceDirect.com. And what this article found, now this research doesn't say credit card. It doesn't say there's a credit card's worth of plastic we're ingesting. What they do say is based on the average size of nanoplastics that we're ingesting, anywhere from 0.1 to 5 grams of microplastics weekly, through various exposure pathways. And so that, I'm assuming, is where they get the, because all the articles that say we're ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic, they're referencing this study, and this study found that it was 0.1 to 5 grams of microplastics that we're ingesting. So I'm guessing that's where they got the amount of plastic that it takes to make up a credit card. And so the articles are just putting it into something that we can at least envision or think about. But again, this is ingesting. This is coming through our water. This is coming through the foods we eat, and so on and so forth. But I've been curious to learn more about the nanoplastics or the microplastics that we're inhaling. And so I found this article, and this was in Florida today. I'm going to share a lot of articles with you in this because there's a lot of things I was looking through to get to this. I've been pondering this for about a week. And this is in Florida today. It says a new study shows some people may be breathing in the equivalent of a credit card worth of plastic weekly. So now it's not talking about eating it or drinking it. Now this is coming from inhaling it. There was another article in Newsweek that basically said the same thing. Scientists warn that toxic microplastics are now getting stuck in our airways. And this is the article by Newsweek that says that. In that article, it says research published in the Journal of Physics in the journal Physics of Fluids on Tuesday shows that we breathe in large amounts of microplastics, which accumulate as particular spots in the back of our throats and our nasal cavities. Humans inhale 16.2 pieces of microplastic every hour, which adds up to about a credit card's worth of across a week. And so I was trying to find out, okay, so there's another stat, there's another referencing a study. So where did that come from? Well, those articles were actually referencing some research presented by a company that makes air filters. And I'm going to share that with you right here. And this article is where this says is you may be inhaling up to 16.2 plastic bits from your clothes and plastic debris every hour. This can add up to breathing in the equivalent of an entire credit card every week. And that stat from the article I just shared with you, IQ Air, referenced an actual study. And this was a study done in Denmark back in 2019. And this study is called Stimulating Human Exposure to Indoor Airborne Microplastics Using a Breathing Thermal Mannequin. And so I'm going to share that study with you here. And this study said that humans are potentially exposed to microplastics through food, drink, and air. The first two pathways have received quite some scientific attention, while little is known about the latter, air. We address the exposure of humans to indoor airborne microplastics using a breathing thermal mannequin. And what they did in this research is they tested 3 different apartments. They had a mannequin that had a breathing apparatus on it that measured the amount of things that came in that were in the air that was being breathed in through the mannequin. And they found concentrations between 1.7 and 16.2 articles being breathed in per hour of microplastics. And that adds up to about 272 per week or per day, 222 pieces of microplastics per day. And that equals up to what they are. And again, the study doesn't say a credit card's worth of plastic, but this is, I'm guessing, where they're getting that data from, or that comparison from, is it's saying we're breathing in up to 272 pieces of microplastic per hour, and that over a week equals up to what they're estimating to be a credit card's worth of data. Now, again, microplastics can be anywhere from down to a nanometer, 1/1 billionth of a meter, up to 5 millimeters. And so the size of the microplastic that you're inhaling has a huge impact on the amount of plastic that we're breathing in. But the interesting thing I found from this, as I was reading through some of this, right, because again, most of the nanoplastic or the microplastics that we're breathing are things we can't even see. So it's not actually microplastics, it's maybe nanoplastics or things that we can't even see. And a lot of that plastic, and this was found in that same study, comes from polyester and from textiles. Things that are in our house, the textiles on our carpets, are in our couches, or our chairs, are on the clothes that we wear. And actually, a lot of it comes out and gets airborne when we wash and dry our clothes. And so it's particularly heavy indoors because this is where these textiles exist. And so they go airborne. There's not as much circulation. And so we can literally be breathing in a lot of these microplastics just through the air that we breathe from the clothes that we wear, because so many of the clothes that we wear are made from synthetic materials, from polyester and other things that, again, when they begin to degrade and break down, they kind of release these really small microplastics or nanoplastics that then become airborne and get into our lungs. And so this is, of course, very troubling, right? I mean, this is a lot that we're breathing in, and there's not a lot of research out there about it. Even when I began looking further about what does this mean for our bodies, what does it mean that we're ingesting and maybe even inhaling one credit card or even two credit cards worth of plastic every week into our bodies. And unfortunately, there is very little research out there about what impact this has on the human body. When it's that small, it's been shown to actually get into our bloodstream, which means it's probably reaching into our organs. There was one study I said that they said they tested different people, and all of the subjects in the study had microplastics in their poop, as you know, that what they were defecating out. And right, so it's omnipresent. It's everywhere. The air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, and it's going into our bodies. And there's very little research about what impact does this have on our health. We're beginning to see the impact it has on wildlife, especially on seafood, where there's a much higher concentration of microplastics in the oceans. But the research on what it does to our bodies and to our organs and to our lungs is really unknown. And it's not just the fact that there's these plastics that don't break down, but it's the pollutants and the things that are on the plastics that can actually be toxic to our bodies and to our health. And so there's a lot of things being done out there. I want to share this other website with you. And these are just things I've done as I looked out there to try to understand more about this. But here's something at the University of Florida that it just talks about contaminants in the urban environment. And this article is looking specifically at microplastics. And it says in this article that the connections between environmental microplastics and human health have not been fully addressed, but are a subject of much interest and debate. Microplastics, primarily fibers, have been found in various beverages, including tap water, bottled water, and beer. They have also been found in sea salts and various seafoods. In 2018, a pilot study found microplastics in fecal samples of all 8 individuals tested. It seems very likely that people are ingesting microplastics, but there is currently no evidence that these plastics have biological effects on humans. The impact of human exposure to microplastics is not yet understood, leaving many questions unanswered. In 2014, this article goes on to say Illinois became the first state to ban the sale of cosmetics containing plastic microbeads. And so this just opens up. There's a whole lot of things we don't know and that we're not aware of. And yet these microplastics are pretty much all around us, and we need to be very aware of this could be having a fairly good impact on our health. Now, I want to share with you also a podcast that I listen to, and it's an interesting podcast. It's not a mainstream podcast. It's just someone who's been fundraising to do their own podcast. They're looking at the cosmetic industry and science, and they did this podcast called Microplastics 101 with Laura Mackley, a PhD. And the thing I appreciate about this podcast is I got the sense that the podcaster was learning about this much like a lot of us are doing, and maybe was even a little bit skeptical. And so they were asking questions of their guest that many people might be asking, especially people who might be a little more skeptical about some of this and really what's at the bottom of this. And I found it a very interesting and even helpful podcast to listen to because it was asking questions that probably need to be asked. And so if you have a chance, I invite you, encourage you to listen to that. I also want to share one last article with you here. And this is an article, well, I just want to go back to the thing I read earlier about the University of Florida, the contaminants in the urban environment. And in that article from the University of Florida, they had a whole section of discussion about what you can do to minimize your exposure to microplastics. What can we do as consumers or as end users or as just people not running institutions to limit our microplastics? And it had a lot of good things that I think were really helpful just to think about. And so I encourage you Some of the things they recommended in that article was to cut back on the use of plastics, especially single-use plastics like water bottles, straws, and cups. Change our habits and products. Learn whether your personal care products contain microplastics by reading the ingredient labels and looking for the word polyurethane or other common forms of plastics. If possible, wear clothing made from natural materials rather than synthetic fibers, and so on and so forth. And so this is where I wanted to jump in, right? Because that's what all of this research made me think about is what can I do? What do I need to be doing to help limit my being a part of the problem? Right. Already, our family is fairly focused on recycling. We're fairly focused on not using all of the major single-use plastics like water bottles and straws and things like that. And even we're a family that we wash and reuse our Ziploc bags. We wash them well and dry them out and use them again, so they're not single-use and we can last longer in that way. But it really got me thinking, what else do I need to do? And there were a few things that I thought about. And one thing, so actually this week, our family actually invested in an air fryer. And one of the reasons we invested in an air fryer is because some of the foods we eat, I recognize we buy them and they come in plastic bags, right? Whether it's corn chips that we eat with our salsa or the French fries that we make, that we cook in our oven. Usually, we get those in the freezer section of the grocery store, and anything you buy in the freezer section, almost by definition, comes in a single-use plastic bag. Whether it's frozen fruit, frozen vegetables, frozen prepared foods, anything else there. And so I thought that by buying an air fryer, we could begin to do some of these things more at home. So when I'm really ambitious, right, I will cook our own tortilla chips. And I've done that fairly frequently. There's a few dishes I make that taste a whole lot better when we make nachos here. It always tastes so much better with freshly fried corn chips. And, whenever we have a meal that would go with French fries, it's always healthier to cut and then cook our own French fries. But both of those things add at least an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to the cooking process. And so it's not realistic to do that on a daily or even on a weekly basis. It's something you might want to do on the weekend, but it's harder to do during the week. And so I thought, well, maybe if we bought an air fryer, we could do it in the air fryer and then be cooking them there while we're preparing other parts of the meal. And that could cut down on those single-use plastics that we're purchasing. So we bought one. Actually made our first batch of French fries last night. They were pretty good. We'll definitely have to get used to it. Not the taste, but just the process of how to make them. And we'll get better at that and cutting them and so on and so forth. So that's one thing that we've been doing. We also do a lot of other things to cut down on our single-use plastics. There's a great shopping service that we use here in DC. And this is not in most cities, but they have it here. It's called The Rounds. And what the Rounds does is they're very much about environmental and sustainability. And what they do is they sell products that you would normally buy in a plastic container, like shampoos, like soaps, like other things, spices and things like that. And they buy them in bulk. And then they put them in reusable containers like glass jars or things like that. And so then every week we have our rounds order that comes to our door. They deliver it by bike. And we get these things that we normally buy in plastic containers that now come in a glass reusable container. And so we get the new products each week, and then we return the containers in a bag we leave outside that they pick up and take back, and then they wash them and reuse them. And it allows us to cut down on a lot of those single-use plastics that we purchase just because, it's hard to buy laundry detergent that doesn't come in a plastic bottle, or it's hard to buy spices that don't come in a plastic little container and things like that. And so we're already doing some things like that, but the air fryer was another step in that direction. The other thing that that really got me thinking about this is, again, how much of the microplastics and nanoplastics that we inhale come from the clothes we wear. And it was both fascinating and disturbing to me how much the synthetic materials that so many of our clothes are made of are actually contributing to the microplastic problem. And right, so they recommend, even the article recommended, well, buy things made from real material like cotton and things like that. But again, that's going to require a lot more creativity about how do we begin to tackle that. And the other thing that this is going to require is, right, one of the reasons we use plastic so much anyway is it's cheap and it's convenient. Right? That's why we use plastic so much in our society. The consumer culture is based on making things economical and making them convenient. And this is one of the reasons why the use of plastic is so incredibly widespread. And so part of what we need to do as the consumer is we need to not value cheap and convenient as highly, right? Because that's what's destroying our environment when we value cheap and convenient over sustainable and reusable, right? That's what leads to this overuse of plastic and what's contributing to these problems. And so we need to actually find ways of how do we need to change our patterns of how we use things, of what we buy, how we purchase things. And now I recognize, and right, even for us, right, you can't always, sometimes you're out of money, you're low on your funds, or you're waiting for your next paycheck and you need to purchase something. But I think what this means is we need to be intentional about how can we not just fall into the inexpensive and convenient category in everything in our decision making, and actually be more intentional to plan ahead, or even be more intentional to save up and just spend more on things so that we don't need to we don't contribute to the problem as much or as easily or as quickly. And so it's really retraining our behavior. And it's going countercultural, going against the inexpensive and convenient, and going for the even more expensive and less convenient, because that's what's going to allow us to ultimately live a bit more sustainably. And so, yeah, I want to encourage you. I want to encourage all of you to be very aware of how what we're using out of our culture of inexpensive and convenient. And how not only is that having an obvious impact on our environment, but there's so many unknowns about what are we doing to our environment that could have devastating effects on ourselves as humans, on our own bodies and our own health, our own ability to breathe and everything else that we need to do just to survive. And so, yeah, microplastics are a huge issue. And as they're around longer, and they continue to break down further and get smaller and smaller, I would suspect nanoplastics and the fact of what we're inhaling and breathing in is going to become even more and more of an issue that we need to be thinking about. So I don't mean to be depressing, and I don't mean to be an alarmist, but I do want to get you, all of us, thinking about these things, being intentional about the choices we make, about the patterns that we set, even the expectations that we have, so that we can leave a better world for our children and our children's children and our children's 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 children, so that we can walk in beauty. I hope these things are helpful for you, my relatives. If you like these discussions, you like the things that I'm trying to talk about here, I encourage you to support my work. I intentionally do not monetize my social media. I don't get money from the advertisements that show on my YouTube channel. But I do have a Patreon site, and every month on my Patreon, I have a Q&A. I have in deeper discussions going on. I have uh, go into depth about the book that I'm writing on decolonizing faith. I have lectures and teachings that I give on join the conversation. I have Q&As both with myself and with some of the guests on my second cups of coffee. And there's a lot of resources now. There's 2 years worth of archived resources on my Patreon page. And so I encourage you, whether you just subscribe for a month or whether you subscribe ongoing month to month, if you would like to support my work, I invite you to subscribe to me on Patreon and the different tiers that I have on my Patreon site. I also encourage you, I am still doing everything I can to get my book out there on Selling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery. And you can buy signed copies from my website, and you can buy 10-pack book study packages that come with a 45-minute virtual Q&A with me that we can schedule anytime up to a year after you purchase the books. So yeah, you can get all those from my website. I just put the link into the chat there, and I'll put all these links into the notes on the video. But anyway, my relatives, I hope you find these things helpful. I appreciate your willingness to join me for these conversations. I'm going to look through the comments here to see if I've missed anything. I know I put a lot of resources out there. Mr. Phil Fox, Yacht A, thanks for joining today. It's good to see you. Steve Yezek, Yacht A, thank you for joining today. I like your comments, Steve. It's good to hear this from you. Good morning, everyone. This is a very important topic, but we are such a wasteful and throwaway society with everything made of plastics. I'm not sure how we can change that. I fully agree, Steve. This is the problem. This is exactly why I was saying we need to find a way to start with changing our own behavior, changing what we expect ourselves to do, teach our children to have different behaviors so that hopefully this can have a compounding effect. But yeah, we absolutely have to change behavior. We have to change culture. We have to change the culture of our country. Again, going from inexpensive and convenient to we're willing to pay more and we're willing to be inconvenienced in order to be more sustainable. So thank you for those comments, Steve. I appreciate that. Anyway, my relatives, I hope you have a great day. It's very much winter here in Washington, D.C. right now. We got several inches of snow earlier this week. We have more snow coming tomorrow. And it's great to experience the change of the seasons. And we didn't get much of a winter last year. And so I'm very grateful for the winter weather we're getting this year. I'm grateful to Creator, Creator. Thank you for the winter seasons that we're getting. And my relatives, thank you for joining me today. Walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakai.